choyo sampo pa gyu trashi pa tuche tempe trinle yarno da pege drolor zampe zebra chen pande lame shabla solwa de Omo a guru vajra dara sumati munisha sane karma uta varda nyeshri badra varsa manya sarva siddhi hum Om a guru vajra dara sumati munisha sane karma uta varda nyeshri badra varsa manya sarva siddhi hum Om a guru vajra dara sumati munisha sane karma Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajra Dara Sumati Munisha Sanekar Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Om Guru Vajra Dara Sumati Munisha Sanekar Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Dagi Jetsun Lama Tuje Che Nyamda Dala Tuje Siksu So Gebe Shesan Dala Tendo So Uyon Sunge Nawa Tsedo So Tseji Ningne Soa Debe Tse Dejen Korlo Visu Lekshun Yila sambe dede malupa geme lungi drupra chingi lo tsoni sodan dikdun shapetse dungi namke yinsu lekshune lapchen tsoni yonsu zopa dang chirani dun chamra chingi lo chanchu pargi nyinsen tukun tu nyu peme siudru lekshun chanchu drupe gegen kunshi shi tungen de la drupra chingi dagi lo na chola chopa dang chumin samchu Wadan chedan tumbe dudun malupa bemel hungi drupra chingi lo dorna tingne tseraba tamchet techi pardune gab tamchet tu rese kyamne lama kele tukje chingi dala siksu so gongyab drewe nyamda dachala jetsun lame tuje rab gongne kudan sungi nawa drame tu nyamsunyongwe kesan topra Kewa kunto yanda lama dan rame cheki pe la long che chin sadan lamge yenden rabzon dorje change kopa nyur tobo sho Pakyuke kudan dagi alu pakyuke sundan dagi nga pakyuke tukdan dagi yi Yerme çıktı çingi aloya makyuke kudan dagi alum makyuke sundan dagi nga makyuke tukdan dagi yerme çıktı çingi alum Mahamuni Shakyamunye Swaha Om Muni Amuni Mahamuni Shakyamunye Swaha Om Muni Amuni Mahamuni Shakyamunye Swaha Sashipeki Choshimeto Tramare Rabalingashin Nide Gempadi Sange Shinto Nanda Shin La Che Para Shoye Dhamma Guru Ratna Mindrala Kam Niryatayami Sangye Chodan Tsoge Chonam La Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapsu Chi Dagi Jinso Gibe Sonam Ki Drola Pinchira Sangye Drubrasho Sangye Chodan Tsoge Chonam La Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapsu Chi Dagi Chushe Gibe Sonam Ki Drola Pinchira Sangye Drubrasho Sangye Chodan Tsoge Chonam La Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapsu Chi Dagi Chushe Gibe Sonam Ki Drola Pinchira Sangye Druparasho.
In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. With the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I become a Buddha. May I obtain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings.
Buongiorno.
Good morning. When we speak, when we communicate in general, I think that one of the great challenges is to try to understand each other, in the sense that inevitably, when we listen to someone, we're listening through the concepts that we have already developed. Inevitably, we were raised in a certain culture, in a certain social context. We've acquired certain information. We've had certain experiences, and all of that together shapes our own worldview. And when we listen to someone or we read something, we see a situation, and now we're talking about listening, we listen through those experiences that we've lived. And I've always believed that teaching is one of the most magical things that exists, because none of us has the and has the ability to take a concept and insert it in the mind of someone else. The only thing that we can do is to use the concepts the other one already has, the knowledge that the other one already has acquired, and try to interact so that with what the other one already has, he can understand something new. It's like a little bit like saying someone learns someone knows how to someone knows how to read and write, but I can give you something to read based only on the letters that you know how to use and recognize. And every once in a while I see it is a little delicate, it's one point a little delicate, is that we use the same words, but often, or sometimes with just different meanings. So we think that we're talking about the same thing, when in reality it's just not the same thing. I'm saying all of this to get to the point that when we say introduction to Buddhism, I mean, they say, what is Buddhism? it's not that obvious. I'll try to put it in words. The first question, often people ask, they first ask, is Buddhism a religion or not? And every time I'm asked this, my answer is actually another question. Explain to me by what you mean by religion, because that will determine if it really is, according to my point of view, it is or not. And personally, something I don't like, I don't like to speak on behalf of Buddhism. I can't speak in the name of Buddhism. I can speak based on my own experiences, but not for all of Buddhism. But what happens is, if I were to describe a little bit what Buddhism is, it's the union of three parts mostly. It's the union of a worldview, or rather, a way of perceiving and understanding, understanding ourselves and the reality around us. That's one part. And then the second part has to do with, let's call it conduct, Chöpa in Tibetan, which is the instructions on how to better interact and live our lives, interact with our surroundings and live our lives daily. And the third part is called familiarization, and these are the tools that are transmitted to help us transform, shape our being, our habits, so that they are, until they're just more and more consistent with the view, the worldview. So this, in a few words, is what it is. We have one part that is more conceptual, and it's really not conceptual, because the view, it starts on a conceptual level, but where we want to get is not conceptual, goes much beyond. To say, like when we see a situation, when we do anything in reality, the way that each one perceives that thing, it's different, and we see this clearly when we are when we find ourselves in a completely different cultural context. So for one, it would be absolutely obvious and one would take for granted, and for the other, it's not at all. For example, when I went to live in India, and I saw in those 12 years when I was there, how, and I was really quite young. I saw that, different aspects of my worldview were deeply embedded in me. And when we live in a context where that's the most normal way, the most common way of seeing things, we take it for granted. But where you then are in another place where that view is very different, we can see it very clearly. We can see this difference very clearly. So the view is not just about reflecting conceptually, oh, this is like that because that's like this, etc., etc. It's more about a spontaneous perception of reality, and then to shape it, we can start with this conceptual view. But our worldview, it comes from our education, our social context, and our experiences. And when we start to study Buddhist philosophy in a more detailed way, at least here we're talking about 300 years after the death of Lord Buddha, was created a great monastery in India called Nalanda, and even there, before studying the Buddhist view, they studied the non-Buddhist views, and they were very diffused in society at the time. So so I went to I studied this. I studied the vision of the Samkhya, the different philosophical views, and some are still present today in India, but we have nothing to do with these worldviews. So I asked myself, you know, and and I don't have a complete answer to this question I asked myself, but I'd like to share the question with you because often the questions are more important than the answers, and the question is obviously, what's the basis? What's the influence that we have that shapes our worldview, our Western modern worldview, where we are today. And I found some points that strongly influence this worldview that we have. We have an influence that comes from monotheistic religions, independently of the fact independently of whether you think of yourself as being religious or not, but we've grown up in this social context. We also have an influence, the influence of a materialistic, scientific, Newtonian view, where external reality is solid. Even our simple concept of time, for example. Just ask yourself, if we asked ourselves, is time relative or absolute? Our spontaneous answer would be, without being afraid of saying the wrong thing, is time absolute or relative? Each one, it's this, what time should we meet? Let's meet at 3 o'clock. Is it my 3 o'clock or is it your 3 o'clock or is 3 o'clock 3 o'clock? How do we live time? We live time as if it were absolute. And then maybe if we start if we start thinking about it philosophically, we can see that it's relative. But our way of living time is as if it were absolute. And I've read that this view of absolute time came about after Newton. Before, there wasn't this concept of absolute time. Also, just to get us to think about this. I mean, we think that time is time. Noon is noon. 3 o'clock is 3 o'clock. Right? But up until just a short time ago, and I don't remember the exact date, but up to when like before the trains, when transport wasn't so fast, before the trains, is that every city had the big square, big church in the square, and the big clock, and each clock was set based on the sun being straight above. So the noon in Verbania wasn't the same as noon in Milan. So if we were to see, I mean, from city to city, time was different. It wasn't the same time. And then when they started with the trains, there was a problem about, what time is the train going to arrive? It gets, it arrives at 2 p.m., but based on which city. So at that point, at that time, by radio, they were able to synchronize these big clocks. And then when the telex was introduced, this very fast communication, even beyond the ocean, they were able to synchronize time on the world level. So, and they had a kind of conference to decide how they were going to synchronize the time. And one proposal was that there would be one time for the entire planet, which meant that here at noon, it was somewhere else it was 5, but supposed to be noon, but But people were used to noon being, the sun high in the sky, and they that's when they introduced these time zones, and that's how we live today. These are all conventions within that we live in, but the crazy part for me at least is that we live conventions that we have created as if they were absolute. Before the clock, the way that man related to time was extremely different. Just to say that in our worldview, one aspect that does influence is, for example, this view that time is something objective, external, and absolute. And if we did some research and looked at, as for physics, etc., there is no such thing as absolute time. But that's not the topic of today, even though it's a really beautiful subject. At least for me, when I started to read a little bit more about it, the relativity of time. At the beginning, it shakes us up a little bit because it's almost as if it takes away the legs that we stand on, because that hold up our worldview, our monotheistic worldview, our mechanical, Newtonian, scientific view. And we also have this influence of a reality that we could say capitalistic. I mean, our relationship with money, our way of possessing, of buying. There are many aspects of our worldview influenced by capitalism. And so I just leave to all of you the question, not the answer. And one should ask oneself, what's the foundation of your worldview, the pillars? But one fundamental point of the starting point is understanding that we live within a worldview. Each one lives within his own paradigm. And when someone asks me, but what's the right paradigm? What's the correct worldview? First of all, it's the worldview that is aware, that is living within a paradigm. First of all, I am aware. If I were to have a consistent and correct view, is that what I'm perceiving is my worldview, which is not necessarily yours. But when we ask ourselves which one is the right one, then we're asking if the way we see things is consistent with reality. But from what I've understood, the things just are not. Things are, from the point of view of many, many complexities, where each one sees according to where he is and the characteristics of the observer, but there is no objective reality that is seen differently from each person. All of this to say, so what is the right world view? The ideal one, from my point of view, is the one that helps us and allows us to live our lives harmoniously with ourselves and with others. It's the worldview that takes us to a feeling of love and not of anger. It's a worldview that helps us to be able to help each other be in harmony, and that will bring us to the so-called peace. Because often we think about peace as being the lack of conflict, and if there's no conflict, then there's peace. And from my understanding, peace is not simply the lack of conflict. Peace is when there is understanding and harmony, and when there's harmony among people. So just think about a family or a relationship between two people. There's a difference between there being harmony and or just simply lack of conflict. So let's talk about harmony. So the ideal worldview is the one that takes us to lessen our conflicts, increase the harmony and the love we have, and and allow us to be well with ourselves and others. I mean, which is what we want in the end. We don't want to suffer. This is something that is common among all of us. There's a fundamental point here. I don't think at all, never at any time, that we should all become Buddhists. I don't think we should ever have to become Buddhists. For me, Buddhism, the way I learned it, it's something that that nourishes me greatly. I have a tremendous amount of respect for it. But what's important is that we start from this awareness that we live within a paradigm, and it's important for us to cultivate a world view, because every day, let's remember, we're shaping our paradigm. Every piece of news that we hear, every piece of information, every experience that we live, little by little, sweetly, we are shaping our worldview. Some time ago, I watched a documentary that talked about social media, and there was something that was said that really touched me. Let me see if I remember it well. It talked about the objective of advertising, because one of the largest businesses that exists in the world is advertising. And this person who was explaining said that, you know, the objective of advertising is to sell a product. And this person said, no, the objective of advertising is the exact words I don't remember, but it was something like, it's to influence us, to manipulate us, to change our worldview, and create needs that we don't necessarily need, and to see things differently. This is the objective, and we are easily influenced. You know, even what we're doing now is a kind of manipulation. I'm trying to quote unquote, or without the quotes, I'm trying to manipulate you to have a vision, a worldview that's similar to mine. But let's do it openly, transparently. What happens is that every day, every moment, the people we talk to, the things we see, we're transforming our worldview. What's important is to direct this transformation, to generate a worldview that is consistent, that helps us live better with ourselves and with others. This is the first point. So, when we look at the worldview that Buddha transmitted, so Buddhism is this union of a paradigm. It's a paradigm with rules of conduct, the tools to help us develop ourselves, so that our life is more and more consistent with this conduct and worldview. Today, we can start with the first. Today, I'd like to give more emphasis on the second point. I say it more for myself than for you. So the worldview has to do with different aspects, but there's some fundamental points. start from 4 points. There are different approaches. Today we're going to take a different approach. They're called the 4 seals, the 4 pillars of the worldview that Buddha transmitted. In Tibetan, the first seal or pillar is the view in the of the view that Buddha transmitted is of impermanence. The second seal is that everything that is impure is of the nature of suffering. And the third seal or pillar is that everything that exists lacks its own identity and lacks inherent existence. And the fourth one is beyond suffering, there is peace. So let's briefly look at these. The first one is about impermanence. We live in a reality where everything that we interact with is in constant transformation. And this is easy to understand. You don't need, years of study and degrees in philosophy to understand that things are in transformation. But our way of seeing reality, and we're not talking conceptually, we're talking on a more spontaneous, direct way. Does does reality appear to us? I mean, objects, situations, the people that we meet. Do we perceive them as being interdependent and impermanent, or as if each one existed autonomously and in a permanent way? I'm going to help you get to this reflection. A classic example is that we see a person today, we see each other, we know each other, we meet, and then in a week's time we're going to see each other. When we're about to see that person, who do we think we're going to meet? The same person or someone changed? Without philosophizing. Today, I'm going to go meet this person. Or do I say, I'm going to go meet a different version of that person because, who knows what happened to this person? Of course, he's changed. I need to recognize that. Of course, no, we don't think like this. Many of you today, many of you, you'll finish here, you'll go home, and you'll find your family members, your children, your spouse. And who do you think you're going to meet? The same people or different ones? I mean, they're the same people, no? So, our own bed that we where we woke up this morning, is it the same bed? And we think about our bed that we'll go to sleep in tonight. Is it the same bed, or do we think we'll go sleep in a different bed? I mean, maybe you change the sheets. Maybe someone changed the sheets on you and you don't know that. But no, we think we're going to go to bed in the same bed. And here, I'm going to use this example. I repeat it all the time, but it really works well. Let me just see here. Are you able to see this napkin well? Uh-huh. Okay. Let me see. You can see it well, can't you? Now, without philosophizing, we need to observe our perception and not reflect conceptually. We see it well. Can you imagine? Are you able to imagine the napkin? Is it the same? It is, isn't it? For me, yeah. Is it still the same one? We can spend all morning doing this. It's the same one, isn't it? Okay. And now? Still. And now? Why yes before and now no? Let's just philosophize a bit. Let's analyze. What happens is the following. When we see something for the first time, we generate what we call, in Tibetan, chunchi, which means a generalized meaning. I call it mental image. And in this moment, you still have the mental image of the napkin as it was before. But every time that I showed you, that mental image was able to be upheld by the actual object. So the object to us hadn't changed. So, but now that first mental image, can that be upheld by the object as it is now? No, no longer. And now we have a new mental image, right? And the one from before, has it changed or is it still there? The first mental image that we generated when I showed you the napkin at the beginning when it was whole, can we still access that mental image? Yes. So it's not that that mental image transformed together with the napkin. We generated a new mental image. And now if I rip up the napkin in tiny pieces, now we see it differently, and so we have a new mental image, but you can still access that first mental image of the entire napkin. So it's a very simple concept in reality here. Mental images are permanent. Mental images, they are not in constant transformation. Instead, the objects that we perceive are in constant transformation. They're impermanent. The definition of impermanence is in Tibetan it sounds nice. Kechik, kechik, chik, chikpe. Kechik means instant. Jikpa means transform. Kechik, kechik, chik, chikpa. Transforms from instant to instant. So the napkin itself is in constant transformation. It's just that transformation is so slow and subtle that we're not able to perceive it because we're relating to that image through a mental image that doesn't take into account the subtleties of the object itself. So what happens? We relate to an impermanent reality through a mental image that is permanent. So if we observed a little bit, let's just think about a person, for example, someone close to us that we know well, a family member, someone that we know well. And we asked ourselves, when I see the person, am I relating to the person or to the mental image that I have of the person? I don't know if you've never said, "Oh, but you're not like this," or "You're not like that." Maybe you're upset that the person doesn't correspond to what you think that the person should be. Or like you go to a restaurant, for example, you order something and it's not what you had imagined. Why? Because one's upset, because one's disappointed, because simply we have an expectation that the reality the reality that we perceive with our senses needs to be consistent with the mental image that we had created. Is this clear? So what happens here? The reality is in constant transformation, the one that we perceive, but we perceive it through this filter. That's where we give names to, we attribute characteristics to it, but it's permanent. So a permanent reality doesn't interact. It's one is separate from the other, so it doesn't interact. What interacts transforms. The definition of interact and the definition of being impermanent in interaction, it's said that they're of the same nature. They're two different things, but of the same nature. Everything that interacts transforms. Everything that transforms interacts. So what doesn't interact doesn't transform, and what doesn't transform does not interact. So what happens is we live in a reality that is in constant transformation because there's interaction. And when we're aware of this, what does that change? First of all, we stop suffering because things are different from how we expect them to be, and we understand and we accept on a deeper level the natural transformation of things. What's one of the beauties of impermanence? That impermanence doesn't mean that today is here and tomorrow it won't be there. You could actually connect it with the saying that says nothing, nothing ends. Everything transforms. So when it's as if I took this glass, as if I broke this glass. I mean, the glass as we see it wouldn't be there anymore, but the water would continue, and the pieces of the glass, they've transformed into small pieces of glass, but they would still be there, wouldn't they? So it's not that the glass ceases to exist and there's nothing there. What happens is there's no longer a glass because the union of the parts can no longer support that concept, uphold the idea of glass, but it does continue. So everything that exists and that is impermanent is in constant transformation, and we relate to this reality through the concepts that we attribute to them. But reality is in constant transformation, and it's important to see that when we observe reality through the perception of impermanence, is that we're not thinking anymore that one day something's there and the next day it's not going to be there anymore. No, we allow ourselves to understand that the concept is no longer there, but we are aware of how it is transformed. So the glass breaks. The glass is no longer there. It's like the napkin, The napkin, the whole piece is there at a certain point. There's no more napkin. But even if there's no more napkin, but the fact that there's no longer a napkin, this opens up to seeing a new reality and to attribute a new name. And it shows us that there's continuity. And often when something finishes, great opportunities appear. But in our normal way of perceiving life, when something ends, how do we live it? It's transformed into something else, or it's just over. Just look, for example, how we relate to relationships among people, if their relationship is over, or how we relate to youth and getting old. Just how difficult it is to accept the fact that we are alive and inevitably we get older. I talk about this because I was touched the day I realized that my hair is not the way it used to be. I had a little drone at home, and I saw myself from above, and I saw the image. I said, "Oh, how wonderful! I'm alive!" Just Just look at my father, look at my grandfather. I mean, that the direction is that one. There's no way to get out of this. And I don't care so much. I mean, the fact is that I'm alive and I'm transforming and everything's fine. But what I am today is a result of everything that I've done and what I was up till today. And tomorrow, it will be, the I will be the combination of what I've done in the past and what I'm doing today. But this shows us the power of impermanence, shows us the power of every action, and it doesn't show us a view of being powerless. It's the opposite. It shows that every interaction determines how that reality transforms. Just look, for example, in our life today. The person that we are today, were we influenced? Were we influenced by the words we heard in our childhood, the situations that we lived, the people that we met? So this shows us that when we interact with someone, we have a power of transformation also in the lives of others. Just like every experience that we live doesn't end there, but it interacts with our being, and it influences us as our life goes on. So one consequence of the view of impermanence is that everything that we do, all the words that we say, even all the thoughts that we have, they're not important, but they're actually determining in our lives. There's nothing that is done just in vain and that ends there. Everything that we do gradually shapes and transforms our life, our being. Like our body. Just look at our body. Have you ever seen anyone, for example, who says, I stopped smoking after 50 years and now I have cancer. And they say, oh, better if I hadn't quit. No, it's not that you got cancer because you quit smoking, in my opinion. It's because you smoked for 50 years, or 40 years, sorry. And of course, there'll be many, many other causes and conditions. I'm not a doctor to talk about this, but what happens is I see in my own body my health today, my state of health is a result of the choices that I've done over the years, I've made over the years. And then gradually they bring their consequences, the results. That it's something that it comes about gradually, our health. Like, for example, when this Japanese Master Keiko, when she came, and it was very wonderful to see a 90-year-old woman, strong, intelligent, healthy, with a great presence, and she's like a meter 50, and she would take. And she was able to take a big, strong man in front of her, and with kindness and with elegance, she was able just to throw him down on the floor. But it didn't just come from nothing. I mean, this is a lifetime of correct lifestyle and diet and training. And, sometimes, I don't mean everyone, but we have this idea that, like for example, I asked you, do you want to age well or badly? Do you want to have a long life or a brief life? I mean, most of us say that we want to have a long life, but in this long lifetime, do you want to be healthy or sick? Oh, we want to be healthy. So it's simple. Now, the way you live your life today, is that bringing you towards aging in a healthy way or in a way that will bring you illness. Healthy, I hope, but that result, it will and that will be a result of how I'm living my life today. I remember my grandfather quite a few years ago. Now he's 97, 98, something like this. And many years ago, maybe he was about 80, he always liked technology. And he was there with his telephone, and there were like games in the phone, and he was playing these games on the cell phone. And I said, no, I said, Grandpa, what are you doing? He said, I do this not because I like it so much, but because I need to keep my mind trained. Because as you get older, the recent memory, short-term memory, weakens, and instead I need to keep training and learn new things. Otherwise, my ability to memorize will deteriorate. And now he's 97, 98, and he's very lucid. But this requires training. And if we spend our lives, once we finish school, we don't learn anything new, and we're just repeating the same things and watching TV. Our ability is like a muscle. It's going to atrophy. So our ability to learn and memorize just gets lost. So the question is, who do I want to be tomorrow? And as a consequence, that takes us to the question, what am I doing today? And this is one of the main points of that first this view brought to us by Buddha, that we live in an impermanent world. We need to take advantage of these opportunities, and we need to remember that we are the greatest agent of transformation in our own lives. We're influenced by the world around us, yes, but the way we live it depends on us. The experiences that we live depend tremendously on ourselves, not completely, but a big part. And this is a fundamental starting point. We're not victims. Buddha said in a sutra, I am my own protector, I am my own enemy. In other words, we are creators of our own reality, our own experiences. Like once someone asked Buddha what he thought of gods. Let's remember that that this was a time of that Buddha lived in a time of like polytheistic worldview in India, and he said, I'm not here to tell you or not if that Brahma, Indra, Vishnu, if they exist or don't exist. What I'm here to tell you is that your happiness and your suffering depends on you and no one else. It doesn't depend on them. So that the gods are there or not there, our happiness depends, or our suffering depends on the choices that we make, the way we interact, the way we live. And this takes us to the point, to ask ourselves, how can we live to be better? And so one of the starting points is understanding that once we see that our reality is impermanent, every action interacts with how every experience interacts. Also our body, our emotional shape, our relationships, our mind on many different levels is in constant transformation, according to what we do, the choices we make. And this point of impermanence touches another important one, which is the question as to whether we have or not free will. And there are some modern views about that that say that there is no such thing as free will. For example, some views talk about, how do you say in Italian? How do you say? I don't know if it's biopsychology, where think we think that we're autonomous in our choices, but then when you actually go to see how conditioned we are by the chemical state of our body and how influenced we are by our culture, etc., and experiences, we see that our level of freedom is very, very small. I don't know if I've ever, I've ever said, oh, if I were you, I would do differently. If you were me with my body, my experiences, my karma, which means all the actions I've done up to today, with my traumas, my education, the same social, cultural context that I grew up in, if you were me, would you do differently? I don't know. Probably not. Maybe yes. But something I'm sure about, you wouldn't do much different. And if I were you, I probably wouldn't do much different than you do, because this freedom of choice that we have is very limited. In other words, let's use an analogy that's not the best, but it works. Are we free to buy anything we want? Let's say yes, but based on two things. I mean, we need, you know, the object needs to be for sale, and we need to have money to buy it. Because if I want to buy something that's not for sale, I can't. Or or something that's forbidden, for example, then I can't. And if I want to buy something that is for sale, but I don't have money to buy it, then I wouldn't be able to either. So we are free to do everything we want, but we need to have created the causes, and we need to also have the right conditions. Are we free from our past? Once we find ourselves here now and we're talking and we live every situation, are we free from our past experiences, every person we've met, from all mental processes and emotional processes that we've lived? Are we free from all of that? Can we perceive reality and live this present moment independently of our past? No. Are we free from the interaction? Are we free from, or are we influenced by the interaction with others? We're influenced. We're not free from this. So where is this freedom of ours? In this every day, in the same moment, we have this ability to choose. Shall I do or not do? Say or not say? Go, not go? I mean, we have this freedom, don't we? Do we have this freedom of making small choices, small actions that gradually they interact and they transform our lives. This is what we mean by the impermanence bringing us freedom, because these small actions that we do, they leave an imprint. More than leaving an imprint, they transform our lives, one after the other. So with this, we have this first point of impermanence. So it's important to see that it's not that the view of impermanence is opposed to something philosophical different, but it opposes our natural, spontaneous way of perceiving reality, because this moment seems to us as being permanent, and And strangely, I mean, we relate to impermanent reality as being permanent. So this first point of this worldview is that we need to live this impermanence as being impermanence, and recognize the power of impermanence. If we went deeper into this, we would talk about karma, and really see how nothing ends there but has a tremendous power. The second seal is that everything that is impure is of the nature of suffering. Sakshitamche dunawa. I'm just going to go right to the point. None of us, no one of us is able to perceive anything independently from himself. And we have these filters. So when I see a situation, I'm perceiving that situation through a filter of my emotions and my knowledge, my worldview, my own senses. We have many filters through which we perceive reality. Just look, for example, I think it's happened to all of us to watch the same movie in two different times. They can almost seem like two different movies. It's happened to me once where I saw a movie and I enjoyed it. I thought it was deep and fun, and then I saw it another time, and so I said, "Let's watch this movie. It's wonderful," and I just didn't even seem. It didn't seem half as interesting. What happened? Did someone change the movie? No, I'm different, and so the experience is different. Like what happens when you wake up on the wrong side of the bed, or when you wake up joyously. I mean, our experiences lived in the same fashion? No. So just to understand that we're not able to experience reality independently from our filters, our traumas, our experiences lived, our emotions, our imprints, our body, our senses, all of these things are like filters through which we live reality. And as long as I have certain filters like anger and envy and jealousy and selfishness, etc., I'm going to live every situation through that filter. And so I'm going to pollute everything that I see and perceive and live with anger, jealousy, envy, fear, arrogance, selfishness, etc. And inevitably, they become experiences that will bring suffering. They're going to pollute the situations, not because not that the person I see or the experience becomes polluted, but it's my own experience that's polluted because I have my filters in between. So everything that is impure, not impure in its own nature, but is lived through selfishness, anger, jealousy, arrogance, fear, anxiety, dissatisfaction, and deeply at the root is ignorance. Inevitably, this will bring us to experience a state of suffering. And but it's a world view that has a crucial point. When we suffer, and every once in a while it happens, normally we're ready to point the finger, aren't we? Do we ask ourselves why we're suffering, don't we? And our tendency is to see that the cause of our suffering, is it that we look inside, or we think that the cause is external? Mostly, the cause is external, and we believe that the day that the world will be the way it should be, the people will act in this way, and I won't be missing anything, and my body will be like this, and this will be like this, that will be like that, exactly how I think everything should be. At that point, I will be happy. almost as if I'm perfect and the world around me is terrible, and we're the victim of this world. That second seal says we're no victim of anyone. We are creating this reality that we're living. And this doesn't mean that external reality doesn't exist. External reality does exist, but the external reality that I perceive doesn't exist for me independently of myself. So the way I live something depends on me by the filters that I apply, the filters that are there more than the ones that I apply. And so the identical situation can be lived in innumerable ways according to the experience of he who lives it. At the basis, we could even divide the worldviews into this first crossroads. So views that think that happiness and suffering depend on um, uh, external conditions, and then a worldview that says that happiness and suffering depend on internal conditions. Let's just observe for a moment. In this moment, these days we're talking a lot about the war. What are the causes of this war? Why is there war? So there are territorial reasons, economic reasons, or is it because of the internal aspects of man, of selfishness and anger and resentment and fear? Why is there war? Just look, when there's a conflict in a family or between friends or at work, why is there conflict? Because each one is attached to the I and the my way of seeing things, and my own interests, my own way of doing things, and then aversion and jealousy and envy. Um, um, you know, or are there more of just objective conditions that arise that create conflict? I think it for inner reasons. I mean, this planet that we live in, if we look at nature, if it wasn't for our selfishness and our envy and our attachment, fear, etc., this planet would be paradise. We're the ones able to transform heaven into hell. So if we looked really what creates conflict and suffering, are they external conditions or external causes or internal causes? And so as a consequence, where's the solution? External or internal? Internal. Because unfortunately, what happens in our lives when we're not well, with sadness, fear, resentment, anxiety, anger, etc., when you're not well, very often, more than trying to resolve that inner conflict, what we often do is trying to forget that state that we find ourselves in. So I don't feel well, so I go buy something. I don't feel well, I drink something, I smoke something, I go, I look for company, I do something outside of me so that I can disconnect myself from that feeling. But that doesn't resolve it, because as soon as those conditions reappear, that feeling comes back because it's not resolved. So this starting point is fundamental. So happiness and suffering are two manifestations of the same thing. They depend. Do they depend mostly on external or internal causes? Our common way of seeing things, without philosophizing, we think that that our happiness and our suffering depend on external causes. I mean, that's how we live it, no? And as a consequence, we're constantly trying to find solutions that are also outside of ourselves. Environmental problems, for example, global warming and all the problems of pollution, etc., are are those caused by external causes or internal ones? This, I mean, technical solutions exist, you know. So, but so it's caused by internal causes, is attachment and greed, ignorance, etc. So, it would be enough just to consume less, or have a more simple life, and and many of these problems would just resolve, But no, we don't want to give up this, we don't want to give up that. So this second seal tells us that everything that we live, you know, everything that is lived with selfishness, ignorance, and this grasping at self gratification, and this deep ignorance that shows us the inconsistency of our view. This all brings suffering. So here we're at a crossroads. So here we say, suffering and happiness, they don't depend on external causes or conditions, but they come from inside. This is an enormous change, because even within even religious context, one holds on to this idea that happiness and suffering depends on something external. Someone says, okay, you can't really be happy in this lifetime, act well, and at afterlife, then if you behave well and can, then you will go to heaven. Huh? So, and what is heaven actually? If we were to reinvent heaven today, we were to say what heaven is today. I mean, just look at how heaven is described in each culture. So paradise, heaven, is everything we like. Everything we like is there, and then nothing that we don't like is there, and then you can live this happy place forever. And the concept of heaven is more or less like this. Today we would have fast internet connection. So, even in Buddhism, I've seen this a little bit. There is this approach where one keeps on believing that happiness depends on something external. If you don't get it in this life, you can reach it in the next. But Buddhism says, you can be in the most amazing, beautiful reality, but if I'm envious and selfish and jealous, etc., then I'm going to suffer. I don't know. On this planet, I mean, there are people who have heavenly conditions, let's say. Many. Does that mean that they are always living in peace and fully satisfied? Absolutely not. So, the second seal, the second fundamental point, is that happiness and suffering depend on our inner state of being and not on external ones. The third point of the worldview, the third pillar, the seal. All phenomena are empty and lack their own identity. Let's try to simplify this. It's the fact that we live in a reality that appears to us as being objective, when in reality, it's subjective. We live in a reality where each one of us perceives everything, as we said before, through this filter. our cultural context, social context, our own body, etc., etc. But when we see someone, when we see something, we live and experience a situation. That situation appears to us as does it appear to us as being subjective? Oh, I see that because I attribute this meaning through my senses and I so experience it like this, or do I see it as reality? Normally, for us, it's reality. The example that I give often and I like is when we hear this sound. Without analyzing, philosophizing, I mean, are we all listening to the same sound of the singing bowl? Like, did you hear it? I mean, how many singing bowls did I play? It's just one. Now, let's analyze for a minute. How does that perception of the sound come about? I touch this object. It creates a vibration in the air. This vibration in the air that we call sound comes to our hearing, to our ears. Through inside our hearing, we call them like sensors. You know, for sure, there's someone who can explain better how our hearing works. But we have this hearing power that perceives the sound, and then we also have a sense consciousness, hearing sense consciousness that then sends that perceives it and attributes a meaning, a name, singing bowl. So when I hear the sound, my and your experience comes from four factors: the actual sense object, the sense power, the sense consciousness, and the discernment, the meaning that I attribute to the object, and it's based on a process of association. If in the past, every time you heard a singing bowl, you were beaten, that what would happen is that if you heard the sound now of the singing bowl, the emotion that comes up would be certainly an emotion very unpleasant. You know, maybe you don't even know why, but there's this association. When I play the singing bowl, the vibration in the air that comes to me and that comes to you is not the same. We're in different positions. The sound reflects and it gets to everyone in a different way. They're not exactly the same frequencies, the ones that come to me and the ones that come to all of you. That sense power of hearing is also different, you know, according to our age and different, you know, characteristics. I mean, we don't our sense power is different, and the sense consciousness is not the same either, and the value we give to it is totally different. If not totally, then it is certainly different. So in front of all this, even if I play the singing bell just one time, the experience of each one is different. The sound that we hear, the sound that each one of us hears is different. Is this clear? Just in the same way, everything that we see is different. Or rather, when I see something, what appears to my eyes is forms and colors to which I attribute a meaning. I heard this story a few days ago. A group of anthropologists, they went to see a tribe. I don't know if it was in the Amazon. Anyway, a reality where for thousands of years, these people lived far from being in contact with any other kind of contact. And these anthropologists were there for a while, And at a certain point, they showed a movie to this tribe, and they said, "We want to show you where we come from." And they were from New York, and they showed this image of New York City, and there were 2 or 3 moments where everyone together said, "Ah," you know, and as if they reacted, as if they recognized something, and then afterwards they went to see, because then they also filmed the people who were watching. But when was this moment where they were reacting like this 2 or 3 times? What happened when they looked at the movie, and there were 2 or 3 moments where it was the 2 or 3 moments where an actual chicken appeared in the movie. When they saw the chicken, the group said, "Ah," because everything else was just color and form, and they had no idea what a skyscraper was, a car. A bit like when we go to the forest and we see everything as being green. A person like them, instead, they go to the forest. They it's not just all green. There's an enormous richness that we don't see. Instead, I remember once I went with Pete, who was here in Albagnano, and we walked to the forest, and he just opened up a whole world to me. As where before I just saw plants and trees. So to our eyes, forms and color appear. And what do we do to these forms and colors? We attribute meaning. So we live in a reality that appears to us as being objective. And in the same way, we relate to these causes of all our mental defilements as being causes that are objective, when in reality they are subjective, like anger and envy, etc. And this is the third seal. It's just one. We could spend days and days talking about this, but let me just add a little accent here. If you take anything, a situation, an object, a person, is it possible to perceive that person, that object, that situation from different perspectives? And then depending on the perspective, the experience changes. Depending on the value that I give to it, the reality changes. The example that I've given many times, for example, if I take this object and I ask you, what is this object? You would say this is a bell. Does anyone have a doubt about that? We all agree that this is a bell. But if I say, okay, from today on, this is no longer a bell, it's a glass. Would it function as a glass? It could, maybe I wouldn't put anything hot in it, but it could work. And someone might say, oh, but there's no, you can't put it down on the table. But in the airport, I saw these little cups made out like in the form of a cone, so it can be a cup. So if I say, from day on, this is no longer a bell, it's a cup. So you come into you come here, and everyone is given a glass like this, in this form of a bell. How does it appear to us? As a glass, or as a bell that is being used as a glass? So what is this? Is this a glass, or is this a bell that I'm using as a glass? It's a bell that I'm using as a glass. We agree. But why is it not just a glass? It's very simple. Because we have related to that object from the beginning. That first value that we attributed to it was bell. And when we attribute a value to an object, we're not aware about this relationship between the base of imputation and the parts to which we attribute a name and meaning. And we believe, on a non-conceptual level, that the name that we've attributed to it is an objective reality, reflects an objective reality. So for us, this, whether I want it or not, is a bell. Is that clear? But I mean, how many different functions can it have? How many different identities, how many different names can this object have and is able to uphold? Innumerable. There's a different way of saying this, which would be the same object in every instant brings with it innumerable possibilities. And as observers, we choose one among these many possibilities, these innumerable ones. But in our ignorance, we believe that the possibility that we've chosen is the only one possible, and it becomes this objective reality. We're not aware that this object that we call bell is one of an infinite number of possibilities. Is that clear? So when we're in front of an object of anger, for example, why is it that that situation upsets us? Because it is an object of anger, or because I perceive that situation through, from a certain perspective, and I live it as such. Why is it an object of desire? Because it's good in and of itself, or because I'm seeing it from a certain point of view? In reality, it depends on how we perceive. There is nothing that is intrinsically an object of jealousy or attachment or anger or envy. And this takes us to yet another point. The greatest power of transformation that exists is changing the value that we attribute to it, changing the perspective. It's, since I relate to everything through this value that I attribute to it, including myself. I mean, we have an idealized image of ourselves on how we think we should be, etc., etc. And there's nothing more powerful there's nothing more powerful than changing our own identity. And this is all part of that third seal. The fourth seal says, beyond suffering, there's peace. It means it's possible to live in peace. It's possible to be in harmony with oneself and others, with joy, without suffering. It's possible to do it, and we shouldn't wait to go who knows where and be in who knows what kind of situation. The state of peace is something we reach internally, independently of external conditions. So this is a fundamental point of Buddhist view, which says that every one of us has the same potential to reach the state of peace and satisfaction, state of nirvana. Nirvana literally means beyond suffering. So, just in a few words, these are the four pillars of Buddha's worldview. So we live in an impermanent reality. So the way I interact, every thought and action and speak, that determines my reality. And the experience, that so-called objective reality depends on, is actually subjective. And if I transfer transform my way of living reality by cleaning the filters and creating a way of perceiving reality that is more consistent, then it is possible to live reality in a peaceful way, in a harmonious way. These are just in a few words the view. And this takes us all to conduct, which is the second part that says, okay, at this point, what is it that I need to do? Conduct is divided, we could say, in two parts. In reality, it's divided into three. We avoid what is harmful. We lessen these negative habits that hurt us. We cultivate what's good for us. And we help and benefit others. These are the three fundamental parts of conduct. So, if we asked ourselves, what is conduct, the lifestyle that one should follow, of someone who wants to follow the teachings of Buddhism, fundamental point would be to put effort into abandoning that which we know brings suffering and cultivate what we know brings happiness and brings us to a state of peace. It's not easy because very, very often we're talking about habits. And there's a very important point here, which is we shouldn't expect to be different from what we are. We shouldn't force ourselves or blame ourselves. Instead, we should welcome ourselves with open arms. Accept who we are. So, am I selfish or not? This is the question. I mean, to ask yourself, what's my priority? The I or the my or common good? Normally, it's the I and the my. I react with attachment and dissatisfaction and anger and envy, but I also have positive feelings like love and joy and generosity and humbleness and many beautiful things that I have. Consistency. It's not that I'm bad because I get angry. As a Buddhist, I shouldn't get angry. Sometimes people ask, can a Buddhist do this? A Buddhist can do anything. A Buddhist or anyone else, can do anything he wants, but he's responsible for his results. And Buddha said getting angry is not beneficial. But it doesn't mean, okay, you've gotten angry, you're no longer a Buddhist. If it were like this, there wouldn't be any Buddhists. What happens is I recognize that anger is not good for me. And so I need to try to avoid this conditioning and with affection recognize the characteristics of my body, my habits, my mental habits, physical habits, that are not good for myself, and direct myself towards what I want to become, to create new habits. This is a fundamental point of conduct. So we shouldn't have this feeling of blame or blame ourselves for something. Oh, look how bad I am. No. When we talk about behavior or conduct, we should first of all have love towards ourselves, for ourselves. We should be affectionate with ourselves to then be able to be affectionate with or have affection for others. But first of all, we need to welcome ourselves and recognize, okay, when I look at myself, what would be better if it were different? And at that point, I direct myself to being what I want to be. So in practice, what happens is that we generate first awareness of, what are the physical verbal and mental the behaviors that we have that are harmful, and once we have the awareness of 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 our habits and the way we interact physically, verbally, and mentally, these behaviors that generate suffering. We recognize all of this, and once we recognize them, that second step is to put put effort into stop nourishing them, feeding them, because we're really made up of habits. So, I mean, how many times has one said to himself, "Oh, I don't want to get angry," and then just falls, and then falls and gets angry again, or many other emotional states like sadness, or maybe it's about a way of speaking. When someone says, "Oh, I shouldn't do that thing anymore," and after a while it just happens again. Why? Because we're made up of habits. We're not robots where you can just like reprogram us and we change. Our programming is very, very deep. So we need to change our habits. Luckily, our mind is malleable, our being is malleable. You need to just create new habits. And we change, but to do that, we need to work on two different areas. One, we need to stop nourishing a bad habit, and the other is to generate an opposing habit. I can give you an example that I like often because it's a simple point, but it's also very powerful. We have this habit. I say we, and I'm just generalizing, but it's very it's very common to complain and criticize, and so we have this habit of highlighting the things that are not going well and to criticize. But the more I criticize, the more dissatisfied I am, and the more dissatisfied I am, the more I suffer. The more I thank, the more I rejoice, the more satisfied I am, and the more satisfied I feel, the happier I am. Also because satisfaction is not a result of what I have. It's a result of the value that I give. Having a lot or having a little, are these two objective or subjective realities? They're subjective. The value that we attribute to something depends often on a comparison. And every time we're criticizing, every time that we complain, then we're creating a comparison that is going to generate dissatisfaction. But it's a habit. I've seen situations, for example, where there were people I knew that until they found something to complain about or criticize, then they just wouldn't relax, because they're so used to doing like that. And if you see that in yourself, you take the commitment to not criticize anymore. Well, and what is so? And people might ask, well, what does that mean to not criticize? Does that mean I can't analyze or have a judgment? No. Let's give an example. I need to take a trip and someone is driving. It's a horrible trip because the way the person drives, it makes me very scared. And then a few days later, someone says, "I'm looking for someone to drive my car. How is that person as a driver?" And what do I do? Do I say, "Fine, oh yeah, he's great," or do I say, "My experience was not positive," and that's it, full stop? And then I'll compare that to finishing the trip and then sending off tons of little messages about how bad the trip was and how bad the person is, and like how where in that case, one puts a lot of effort into highlighting the 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 lack of qualities of the other. So we take this commitment to not criticize, to not complain. If there are things that are not going well, then we try to find where we can fix the situation. Someone for at some point.
Noi lo utilizziamo, come noi possiamo fare per migliorarlo?
An example was that someone was in the hospital and Rinpoche came to see, and the person was just complaining so much about the hospital, and it wasn't, this, wasn't that. And the Rinpoche just answered, oh, we make it better, So the point is, when I have the mind that criticizes, I don't block it. I let it come out, but I don't nourish it. I just let it just come and go. I remind myself that it's a habit and it's just going to go. So this desire to criticize comes up. I just take a breath. I'm quiet. I stay quiet. At the beginning, maybe something will come out. But if I lose, and then there'll be times where if I'm not vigilant, then before I know it, I'm criticizing. And this is that first step. But the first step is about awareness. The second step is about not blocking and not nourishing. So I'm not nourishing, I'm not going to react with that desire to criticize, not even mentally. I don't even get into a mental dialogue of criticism. And that second step, that's the second step, but it doesn't last. And then the third step is doing that and maintaining that vigilance and letting it completely pass. And then the next step is to generate a completely opposing mind where I look for gratitude, I look for positive qualities. So the situation or whatever it is, it doesn't mean to hide or to pretend to not see what's not going well, but instead we see what we don't that we don't like, and we see how we can transform it, how we can make it better. But we don't stay blocked in this habit of criticizing. So this is an example of how to change the conduct. And by also generating an opposite mind. There are mostly 7 qualities that we should have. When we talk about conduct, there's an important point here. It's wonderful to see where our shadow is, but we should put our energy into the light. Following another analogy, it's wonderful to recognize the sickness, but their energy should be put into the healing process. So just pointing the finger at the illness doesn't take away this sickness or a problem. It's the same thing. We need to put energy into a solution. So no matter how much I point the finger at myself and saying how terrible, how angry I am, how, that doesn't solve the problem. So there are 7 fundamental points to conduct. And there are different approaches, but this is one of the possible ones. The first point, which is the basis, is called bodhicitta. In other words, it's this feeling of love and compassion towards oneself and also towards others. This is our starting point. the fact that we inevitably we desire happiness and we don't want to suffer. Just look that inside each one of us there's this strong, strong desire, this attraction to happiness and this aversion to suffering. I mean, we all have this. When this attraction to happiness and aversion to suffering is directed exclusively to the I and the my, it's called selfishness. And this attitude of selfishness brings us to divide the world into three categories: friend, enemy, and indifferent. What is good to me is a friend. What's bad to me is an enemy, and I have aversion towards. And if he does neither good nor good to me, then I have indifference. And we divide the world up into these three categories: people, objects, situations, and then these three become 9 because we have the friend of the friend is our friend, who's beneficial to me is my friend, and also who hurts my enemy is also my friend. Who hurts me is my enemy. Who hurts my friend is my enemy, and who does a good to my enemy is also my enemy. And then we have situations and people that are neither beneficial nor detrimental to me or my friends. To me, they're neutral. And so selfishness leads us to relating to any one of these 9 categories. If we make a comparison, then we make a comparison, and he who has more, I feel envious and inferior, and if I have more, then I feel arrogant. So we never relax. So the key is to see that, to look at this selfishness that we have, and we shouldn't stop trying to be happy, but we should expand this feeling and include everyone. We should see every other being, human or not, and say your happiness is as important to me as my own, and your suffering as important to me as my own. So we take away this barrier between us and others. This is a job for lifetimes, but this is the direction we need to go. We recognize that we're selfish, and we direct ourselves to become altruistic, because we understand that egotistically speaking, it's better to be altruistic, because at the end, I want my happiness, but I realize that the more I'm obsessed with my own happiness, the more I will suffer. But the more I'm able to include others, the more I'm able to open myself up towards others, the happier I'll be. Okay, we're not going to get into details about this, but this is a fundamental point. It's the basis, it's the starting point, this sincere feeling of love towards ourselves that helps us also develop love towards others. When I talk about love, I mean, in Sanskrit, we say Maitri. Maitri, the definition of Maitri in Tibetan, Champa, means to be attracted to happiness, desire the happiness. So I love myself. I'm attracted to my own happiness. I love your happiness. I'm not attracted to you. I'm attracted to your happiness. In other words, I love myself. I desire my own happiness. I love you. I want you to be happy. We use the word loved often. We use it often in the context of desire, because it's that same word, love, amare in Italian. One possible root comes from the Sanskrit kama. Kamare, amare. Kama means passionate love. Also, in English, love comes from lubya in Sanskrit, which also means desire. So just to understand the difference, we could say, I love chocolate. I mean, we could say that, can't we? I love chocolate. What do you understand? That I want chocolate to be happy? Or that I'm happy when I have chocolate? That chocolate pleases me, and that when I have chocolate, I'm happy, and so I love chocolate. But if I love you in the same way I love chocolate, it means that I desire you. Means that it's not that I'm attracted to your happiness. I'm attracted to your presence, your person, in order for me to make me happy. So one thing is, I love you, I need you to be happy. And another thing is, I love you, your happiness is important to me. I'm attracted to your happiness. It's just two totally different worlds. I mean, they can coexist, they're not contradictory. But they're two very different things. It's clear, isn't it? So, in this context, when we talk about love, it's about being attracted to the happiness of others. It's a simple exercise, but not easy, is seeing the people that we think, or that we say we love, and observe and say, where is the love? How much am I attracted? How much am I attracted to the happiness of the other, and how much of that love is about that person's presence, and my happiness depending on that person's presence. But which is fine, but but the more important one is being attracted to the happiness of that person, because the nature of desire is dissatisfaction. The more I have, the more I want. I mean, it's like looking at a relationship at the beginning, Oh, this person cooked for me. It was so wonderful. And after a few years, the person cooked a meal for me. One just takes it for granted at that point, because the more I have, the more I have, the more I want. I mean, the nature of desire. The nature of desire is dissatisfaction. I mean, it would be logical to say the more I have, the less I want. But our experience is the opposite. We know the more I have, the more I want. And instead, with love, it's different. When we love someone in a deep way, where we desire their happiness, that brings satisfaction and not dissatisfaction. That fills us up. It doesn't empty us. So one qualities that we need to cultivate is to learn more and more how to love. I love all to love human beings, to love animals, to love to give the importance to the happiness and the well-being of others, because we have our own. We allow ourselves to look in the eyes of others and say, your happiness is important to me. Your happiness is important to me. I don't want you to suffer. And this is a very important point of this training, because this conduct is a form of training. It's not that you have or don't have. There's a grace part. There's that you have a relationship with someone. There's desire. There's love. There's attachment. I mean, we can gradually increase that percentage of love. So we can, it's not that we say, okay, no, okay, this relationship is polluted, it's better that I end it. No, it's not as black and white. There's shades of gray that we to gradually cultivate these positive aspects. So, so, so towards your, so we do have both these feelings of, you know, of selfishness, but also we need to cultivate more and more these feelings of love towards others. So that then we have the 6 perfections, or called the paramitas. I don't really like this translation of perfection. In Tibetan, it's parchin. Par means beyond, and chin means to go or having gone. So means having arrived somewhere, having or going beyond, or having gone beyond. So the first of the 6 is generosity. So it's about developing generosity to its maximum potential. So what are the qualities that we can develop? Generosity, morality, patience, enthusiastic effort, concentration, and wisdom. The first is generosity. Generosity means I do something for you, I share with you something that I have, so that you can be happy or suffer less. And in this sharing something with you, what do I have? Maybe materially, I can help you. I can give to you materially. I can give to you from an emotional point of view, some kind of emotional support, affection. I can give you protection. I can help someone avoid a certain suffering. And I can also share spiritually. I can help someone to know himself better, have tools tools that can help him develop his own qualities. But it's important to be aware and to train with awareness. Okay, so if someone asks, what does a Buddhist do in his life? What we should do is cultivate love, generosity, morality, patience, enthusiastic effort, concentration, and wisdom. So generosity is about sharing materially, and giving love and affection, protection, and the Dharma, the spiritual path. In a few words, it's just to share what we have based on the needs of the other, not on what we have, what we want to give. So generosity requires the ability to see the other and ask oneself what the other one needs, because I can give a lot to you, but if it's not what you need, it's not enough. A classic example would be, I can give you a lot materially, and maybe you even like it, but what you need is affection and love. So what happens is there's that emptiness remains, and I'm saying, well, I'm giving you so much and you like it, and you say, okay, you know, if you have a little bit of awareness, then you could say, yes, it's true that I like it, but what I need is not material. I need affection. I don't know if that's clear. So in generosity, we should ask ourselves what the other one needs, and ask, you know, be humble and with humility ask ourselves what the other one needs, and not be indifferent to these needs. And we practice generosity daily. the people around us. Generosity um, is 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 about being silent when someone needs quiet, or listening when someone needs to be listened to. Or it's about giving a piece of advice when that advice is welcomed. Um, so it's about being at the service of others and adapting to the needs of others instead of imposing our way of being and our worldview onto the other. Generosity is quite complex. There are many aspects to it, but it generates also a lot of joy, and it's very important. So the first quality on the path that we should cultivate and develop is generosity, and the second is morality, and it's different from ethics. Ethics, is about what's right and wrong, what's good, what's bad, what's beneficial and harmful, and we could spend years talking about ethics, and it's extremely important. But that's one thing. Morality instead is our ability to cultivate what we know is beneficial, and our ability to abandon what we know is detrimental. You can have bad ethics with with if you have bad ethics and very strong moralities, then that's terrible, because if according to my ethics I believe that it's good to hurt people and I follow that perfectly, I have strong morality, then I'm doing a great harm. So ethics is very important. But our problem often is the opposite, is that we know that it would be good to act in a certain way, but we're not able to follow that. So in morality, morality is also about maintaining commitments and keeping our word. Morality is our ability to abandon what we know is detrimental, and our ability to to practice what is beneficial. And it's so important because we're made of habits. And it's through this ability to give ourselves a direction and maintain the direction that we're able then to change. Instead, we just stay the same, reinforcing these negative habits. So the second point is morality. The third conduct, the third so-called perfection, is patience. So we have generosity, morality, and patience. Patience starts with this ability to not react with aggression when faced with an object of anger. So there's situations that don't correspond to how we think they should be, or behaviors of others that we don't like, or situations that make where we suffer. It's our ability to have inner space to not react with aggression when faced with this. This is fundamental, because the opposite is control of oneself, and losing control and reacting with anger creates tremendous damage. I mean, have you ever heard someone say horrible things because they were angry, or maybe it's happened to yourself, where you say things that you would have never said if you weren't taken by anger? But once these things are said, they're said. But oh, I was angry, I'm sorry, Okay, I accept that you were upset, But that pain, that wound remains, doesn't it? It's said that one needs what takes years and years and years to build can be destroyed with one instant of anger. And that's not an exaggeration. For example, with a relationship of trust between two people, sometimes it takes years to build. In one moment of anger, it can all be destroyed. Anger has an enormous power of destruction. It's frightening. And so it's fundamental for us to have control over our actions. And when we see that there's anger, first of all, we need to make sure that we don't manifest it physically, then verbally, then mentally. So beyond whether I am, according to me, right or wrong, often people, I've seen people, many times, people get very upset and they're very angry, and then they say, but I'm right, you know? Or I've heard people say, you know, absolutely correct things, but in a very angry way, you know? You know? And in the same way, you know, even if it's something very, you know, correct for the person at the moment, it's right, it's correct. If that thing is said with an attitude of aggression, you know, it's what talks louder, the way in which the person expresses himself or the content? No, actually the way that we communicate. So if I want to say something and I want someone to understand something, I need to be very careful with the way I express myself. I mean, it brings so many bad results, anger does. So it's important to practice patience. Patience, there's this patience of not reacting with aggression in front of an experience of difficulty. And then a second way of patience is about, you know, we say it's like you don't let go of your path, you know, your direction of your path in spite of difficulties. So I'm on my path, I'm having troubles, but I maintain my way, you know, in spite of what happens around me. I won't let myself be taken by conflicts or difficulties, but let's concentrate on the fact that patience is about not reacting with aggression. We put our energy towards a solution. We're not trapped in the problem. We don't go against, we don't go headstrong towards what we think the problem is. Instead, we put energy into the solution. We go towards the light instead of staying in the darkness. Let me just give you an example. In a relationship with another person, a person acts in a way that we don't like. I mean, this can happen, can't it? Says something that we don't like, does something that we don't like. I mean, there could be so many things. And I think that no matter what the relationship is, from parents to children or husband, wife, you know, among friends or at the workplace, inevitably, at some point, the other person will do something that we don't like. And in that moment, what can we do? We can react because the other person doesn't correspond to this idealized image that I had created. So we can attack, and often like that we're entering into the same energy, you know. So you attack me, I'm going to attack you. So, you know, what does that happen? You know, oh, you attacked me because I attacked you, and then and then we get into a debate, you know, who gave the first blow. But that's not the point here. who gave the first blow. This is not the point. I mean, if you hit me first and I reacted in the same way, at the end of the day, it's the same. So, what do I want to cultivate? Do I want to have a relationship of conflict or of harmony? I see that you act in a conflictual way, so I should act in an opposite way. Is it difficult, tiresome? Yes. But how difficult is it to enter into a conflict like that and nourish a conflict like that? How much energy does it use up? I mean, what uses up less energy? You know, not getting in, not jumping into the conflict or nourishing that conflict. You know, in my opinion, it takes a lot more energy to jump into the fight. It's tiresome at first to not react, but in the end, it uses up a lot less energy and will be a lot less tiresome. So patience is also about this. I mean, there's a situation that I don't like. So how can I react to have a better relationship and not just reinforce this conflictual relationship? I want to put my energy towards the light and not towards the darkness. I see that you act in a way that I don't like. I'm not going to go to oppose you, but I'm going to ask myself, how can I welcome you and help you be a better person? But in our society, when someone acts in a certain way that we think is wrong, we have, our culture, has this, our culture favors punishment, you know, um, you know. It, so if someone does something that we don't think is right, we need to stop them, and then we think that we also need to punish them. When someone does something, instead, when someone does something that we don't think is right, I think we should see them, recognize that what they're doing is not correct, but ask ourselves, what can I do that would be better for you? Sometimes I might even need to use some force to stop someone, but my objective is not about punishing that person. So this patience requires not getting into it requires not acting with aggression in front of an object of aversion. It's not at all easy. The fourth quality to develop is called enthusiastic effort. It's about putting energy into what is positive, even if it's difficult. So where we recognize something is important and is good for us, we should put energy into it. It's the opposite of laziness. Laziness is when we know that something is good, but we just don't feel like it, so we don't do it. Enthusiastic effort instead means that I know that that's good for me, it's good for others, and even if it's tiresome and I don't feel like doing it, I'm going to do it. Enthusiastic effort is fundamental because what determines the results that we have in life, the way that we transform ourselves, is about where we put our energy. It's not enough to have the intention. We need to direct our energy into that, to follow that intention. So we need effort. We need energy. This ability to direct ourselves in this way. So with the way we use our speech, our actions, our thoughts, we use our life And it's not at all easy because we're used to doing differently, and changing habits is very tiresome. I mean, it really is the opposite of laziness. I know it's difficult, but I'm going to do it. And this is important. One opposite of enthusiastic effort that we have together with laziness is this law of minimum effort and maximum comfort. This idea that if we live with minimum effort and maximum comfort, that we'll be happy. And from what I've been able to see, it's not like that. So we should put effort into what is healthy and virtuous, but not as like having a healthy, like a healthy lifestyle. Physically, it can be tiresome because maybe in this social context, it means that we have to leave some comforts, to eat better because it's more expensive, or so we choose to not do certain things that are pleasurable, but I know that they're bad for me. It means changing some aspects of our lifestyle that we think were pleasurable. So I mean, all of this requires effort. A relationship with another person, for example. Is it enough just to create one relationship and then it stays like that forever, or does it need to be cultivated? It needs to be nourished. It needs to be nourished. And that requires energy. But if that relationship is important, then I need to take care of it. I need to invest energy into it. Otherwise, sooner or later, without even realizing it, it doesn't grow. So the way we direct our energy is fundamental. And life is full of difficulties, and it's and is tiresome, but life is tiresome. So where we put our energy is fundamental. Giving a healthy body, it's not always easy, it's not always spontaneous. Keeping an emotional, being emotionally healthy, being growing spiritually, all of this requires a lot of energy. So we need to create familiarity with putting energy into what is virtuous but not easy, so that we can change our habits. So we have generosity, morality, patience, enthusiastic effort. And the fifth one is concentration. Concentration and is another very important quality that we should develop. It's this ability to have control over our minds, to direct our minds, to say, mind, stay here, and then the mind does. To not allow our minds to be like a leaf in the wind, or a monkey in the tree that goes up and jumps from one branch to another, constantly. Because our experience often, unfortunately, is, I leave the mind here, and then before I know it, where's my mind? Somewhere else. So come back here. And after a while, before we know it, it's somewhere else again. Concentration is this ability to direct our mind with awareness, and so that the mind goes where we want it to go. It's an incredibly important quality and requires energy. It's not spontaneous. It's a quality that needs to be developed. But what's interesting in the 6 perfections, that first we practice generosity. That gives us the strength to practice morality. Morality is the basis to be able to practice patience, and patience supports us as we practice enthusiastic effort, and enthusiastic effort gives us the conditions to be able to practice concentration, and concentration is the basis to practice wisdom. Wisdom is a view that's consistent with reality. I see something, I see impermanent as being impermanent, I see subjective as being subjective, in just a few words. So, but not on a conceptual level, but on a much deeper level. And if we were to ask ourselves, I mean, what, a person who wants to follow Buddhism, what does he do? He transforms his worldview and cultivates his ways of being, physically, verbally, and mentally, with these 7 points, generating love and the 6 perfections of the so-called 6 perfections. This means, so what do I do in my life? Beyond the fact that one maybe is a doctor, or lives. It's one question is about one's livelihood, but the real question is, do I live life as an end in itself, or is there more? I mean, Buddha has taught us, what I see is that Buddha says that life should be lived as a tool, and our life is cyclical. Just imagine the following. We're going around, let's say we're going around this round room, and we go around, and at a certain point we get to the same point, but we do it again and again and again. And each time we can do something different. Maybe once we do it walking, and another time we do it running. Maybe once we're looking at the walls, or looking at just one point of the wall, and we do it again and again. I mean, and so these possibilities of doing it also in one way or another way, these get repeated too, but we just keep going round and round. After a while, it's not so important what I'm doing as I'm going round, but how that experience is transforming me. If I just, every time I go around, there's some kind of change, there's some kind of transformation. So the objective is not what I do, but how it transforms me. The objective in life is not what I do in this lifetime, but who I become. Understood, like, what are my qualities? What are the characteristics? Who am I as a person, and how am I developing and growing as a person? This is much more important than what I do, because what I do sooner or later ends. And let's just say it as it is. Much sooner than later, we're all going to die. I wish everyone a very long, healthy, joyous life. But do we all agree that sooner or later we're all going to die? Is it a certainty or not? And according to what Buddha transmitted, the view that Buddha transmitted, and that I share fully, there's a continuity after death. Before I gave this example of the glass, when does the glass die? When the parts that compose the glass can no longer sustain the name glass. But when the glass breaks in 1,000 pieces, and there is no longer a glass. The parts that make up the glass, they continue to exist, don't they? And they transform into something else. What is death? Death is a concept. Death is this moment when the body is no longer able to support what we conceptually call life. And what happens is the body transforms in a different way, and then the mind transforms as well into something that goes beyond. It goes beyond the identity that we have of this life, you know. So the identity that we have is based on our body and our mind. What happens with death is that the coarse body ceases to, and it will transform into ashes or whatever, but it continues, it transforms, and the coarse mind absorbs into the subtle mind, which absorbs into the very subtle mind that continues from life to life. We call it soul. I prefer to not use the word soul because the word soul is charged with all of the meaning of the Christian worldview. But at death, this very subtle body and very subtle mind continue, according to Buddhism, and simply living with this awareness that there is a continuity of the individual after death, and that there's a continuity before birth, takes us to this cyclic view. It's not that there's birth and then death and then who knows what after. There's birth and death that meet. And from death we go to rebirth, and then after birth there's death. And it's in this lifetime it's not important. No, I became a doctor, I became a lawyer, I got married, I had children. This is important, it's wonderful. But what's important is dying a better person than the one who was born, and what characteristics and qualities that I cultivated and developed, or did I cultivate more resentment and aversion and envy, etc., or the opposite? Did I cultivate more love and more qualities? So, even if we just look back at a year, who am I today compared to a year past? Am I a more stable person? Do I have more awareness? Do I have more love? Am I able to live situations in a more mature and healthy way? Have I bettered myself as a person or not? Probably we'll see that some aspects of ours have worsened and some have bettered, but what's important over long term that we are able to cultivate more qualities and become better people. Okay, I wanted to have children and I didn't have children. I wanted to be I wanted to be a doctor and I didn't manage. Okay, game over. Just try again. But what's important, really important, is that even if one life becomes different from the next, or even one day is different from another day, when you look back, what we lived in childhood and what we're living today, these are different things, but there's one same point. It's the same person who's living those experiences. So life is not lived as an end in and of itself, but life is actually a tool to be able to transform ourselves as beings, to be more satisfied and more balanced and have less hate and less resentment, to grow as people, to better ourselves. Because sooner or later we're going to die. And we continue, but the way we continue is strongly conditioned by how we live our lives today. And the problem isn't about dying, because if dying were a problem, then that means that there would be a solution to it. Is there a solution to not? Is there a solution to dying? I don't know any. So dying is not a problem, it's a fact. The problem is living badly and dying badly. The problem is living life with resentment and dissatisfaction and anger and sadness. This is a problem because, you know, it's a problem because there is a solution. So in the end, we should direct our lives as a tool to develop ourselves, to cultivate love, satisfaction, stability, joy, concentration, wisdom, which is summarized in the development of love and wisdom. So we have the view, we have conduct, and for last, as we say, last but not least, there are, sometimes it's translated as meditations or familiarizations. These are the tools that are transmitted to help us familiarize ourselves with our qualities, to live consistently with the view and have a correct conduct. So we have sacred art, these images that help direct our mind in one way or another. There are meditation techniques, there are mantras, and there's recitations, there's study. There's many, many tools that we can use to help us familiarize ourselves. And here it's important that each one adapts, that one uses those that adapt best to one's needs. Like there's a part of Buddhism that's very philosophical, you know, and then there's another which is, we say, sutra, and then maybe another part that is quote unquote more mystical, like the tantra. You know, to do adapt to what is best for your personality. There are many, many different tools, because many different approaches, because we're all very different, you know. We're different. We don't need to follow in the same way. Once, you know, sometimes people would go to Lama Michel Rinpoche and say, "Oh, I'd like to go find this master from this other tradition. Can I go?" And Rinpoche would always answer, "Yes, go." And what's beneficial, take what's beneficial, and what you don't find beneficial, just leave it. So we need to try these tools, use these tools. Knowing how to meditate is useless if you don't meditate. One needs to have his own experience, and otherwise one just keeps on with the present habits. We need to be very malleable, you know. Rinpoche jokingly a little bit would say, those who talk a lot should learn to be more quiet. You know, those who can't sit still, you really need to learn to sit and be quiet. Those who never want to leave the house need to go and travel. So to exercise this, but it's important to recognize that we are constantly shaping ourselves with every experience, and the question we should ask ourselves: do I want to shape myself in with awareness or not? Do I want to give myself a direction, or do I just want to follow the direction that life presents to me, as if I didn't have the freedom to choose? I hope that you can all live your lives with awareness and direct yourselves towards what you want, and not simply just let yourselves be taken by the situations that you find yourself in. So I invite you to reflect and see what could be beneficial to you, and try to put it into practice, bring it to your daily lives. So, for example, there's also a very academic way of an approach to explaining Buddhism, where we, with the debate, and there are texts that just never ending. There's a tremendous amount of reading in Tibetan, only in Tibetan. It's just an enormous amount of books of various arguments, and if one wants to study only Buddhist philosophy in a more detailed academic way, one would need at least 18 academic years, which means 6 days a week, 12 hours a day, 11 months a year. There's so much to study. I did quite a few years, not 18 but 15, and I can tell you that there's there's certain subjects that I didn't deepen. There are 5 main subjects, and I did mostly 3, and then 2 deeply, 3, and then 2 not so deeply. And my master said those first 2 are the first 2 subjects are like the body, like the body, and the others are like the implements. And my master said you have a very strong body, and so and these subjects are like the Lamrim, the graduated path to enlightenment, and then also the correct view. And then there's another part that has to do with the Abhidharma, which is cosmology, and then the other one is has to do with vows. We don't have all the time and space for this, and our objective isn't to be academics. Our objective is to take what's beneficial and put it into practice. So we don't need to understand everything. We don't need to have a who wants to study is very, very welcome. There's so many wonderful it's fundamental that there are those who have deeper understandings, but in our reality, let's try to put into practice what's beneficial to us, and as a consequence, benefit also those who are around us. Let's remember that we need to get out a little bit of our comfort zone and allow ourselves to play the game, to ask ourselves with sincerity, what am I doing? Where do I want to go? Some ask me a lot. Often, people ask me often, they tell me that they want to study Buddhism and ask me where to start. And you start where you are, like, like if, how do you start a friendship? You start by getting to know each other, spending some time together. Um, so we begin, we we follow Buddhism by looking more at the view, at the view, the different types of of practices and meditations there are. It's kind of flirting, and until you fall in love. So first we need to develop this falling in love, and there are many different ways. Sometimes there are those who just fall. It's like love at first sight, and there are others who take more time. And so I leave each one of you to get close to Buddhism according to your own ways of being and your own necessities, your own needs. This is important that we should follow the path according to how we are. We don't need to adapt ourselves, to follow a very rigid, path or system. But we should be sincere with ourselves and put into practice. Our objective here is not to become Buddhist or belong to a group called Buddhist. No, instead we want to if you sorry, there are many, many other instruments, even beyond Buddhism. So that was our objective, to take what's beneficial for us and put it into practice. And as I've often said, if anything you heard here today that you think could be beneficial in your own life, please put it into practice. I remind you that we don't have this concept in Buddhism to try to convert anyone. We're just openly sharing, and each one takes what he thinks is beneficial for him. So it's time for our dedications now. Traditionally, at the beginning, it's important, this moment of sharing. We generate the right motivation, and at the end, we dedicate what we have that positive energy that we've generated. We dedicate it to ourselves and for others. So now it's time for our final dedications. And this afternoon, after lunch, it's 3 or 3 o'clock, I don't remember. We'll do the refuge ceremony. It's a kind of ceremony, let's say, where we formalize an inner feeling. It's something very personal, and for many years I did it in a more personal context, but I realized over time that if I needed to find that perfect moment, to organize it, it just wasn't coming. And so I've set this, I've set the refuge ceremony. I've put it in the schedule, so once a month we do this. You're all welcome. If you've already taken refuge, you want to renew your refuge vows, you're welcome to come. If you're just curious, you're also welcome to come without actually taking refuge.
Simcho Rinpoche Amake Panama Ke Gyuruchi Kepa Nyambara Me Payang Kongne Konto Pelwar Shun Shide Simcho Rinpoche Amake Panama Ke Gyuruchi Kepa Nyambara Me Payang Kongne conto pelwaresho. Possa la preziosa mente pacifica che non è ancora nata nascere e crescere. Possa quella che è già nata non degenerarsi e crescere sempre di più. Chetsun lame kutse rapten chin namkra tinle chokchur gepa dan losan tempe drume sasumgi drove munsel taktu ne gyuruchi kewa kuntu yanda lama dan drame chekipe la longche chin sadan lamge yunten rabzone dorje change kopa nyur tobe shoya nimo dele tsendele Nime kuyan delek shin, Nyensen takto delek pe, Kuncho sumki jingi lop, Kuncho sumki ngodrubot sol, Kuncho sumki trashi shon.
At dawn or at dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness.
Grazie.
Trashidine, thank you everyone. Have a nice lunch. Have a good lunch. And we'll come back at the We'll come back at 3:30. Okay, so we'll come back at 3:30.